So I recently bought the Canon RF 28-70 2.0 lens, and it has quickly become the lens that I keep on my camera all the time, especially around the house with my family, photographing our kids. I've also used it on wedding days for a lot more than I thought I would. So is this worth the $3,000 price tag, and will it replace some of my prime lenses in my collection? Hey there, I'm Katelyn. This is my YouTube channel. I'm glad you're here. This is a place where we like to empower photographers to build profitable and purposeful businesses while also giving you a little behind the scenes in our everyday life. So today we're talking about this massive lens that I purchased a few months ago, the 28-70 2.0. It is so big. I mean, we literally pulled it out of the box and we're like, oh my gosh, I'll never use this thing. But that has actually not been true. I have not taken it off my camera around our home since I got it. But I first want to do a little disclaimer. I am not a tech reviewer. And if you've seen our other reviews, if you saw my review on the R6 when I first got it, I am not going to go over all the specs. I'm not going to go on a deep dive about all the technical stuff. I'm just going to share my experience. I've been a photographer for 12 years, wedding photographer, and I just want to tell you how this is changing the way that I'm shooting, and I hope it will be impactful for how you make your decisions about what you're going to buy and purchase in the future. So one of the reasons why we ended up purchasing this lens and why we're reviewing this lens is because so many people left comments on our R6 video about how amazing the RF lens collection was, how sharp it is, how impressed I would be. And so even though I said I would never buy an RF lens, I definitely am not buying all brand new lenses, at least not right now. Here I am today holding one. So I'm going to dive into what I think about this lens and what you need to know about it right now. Okay, so let's start with what makes this lens special. This lens is special because it's a zoom lens that has an aperture as wide as 2.0, which I've never experienced in my career, and it even sounds strange to say that a zoom lens can go that low. It's also special because it is so heavy. It literally weighs, this part, the lens, weighs double what the R6 did. It's super heavy. It's long, but it's also really wide. It's a 95mm filter thread, and it is expensive. It's $3,000. So I know what you're thinking, like, oh my gosh, no normal person would spend $3,000 on a lens like that. But I'm gonna explain to you why it could potentially make more sense financially than making other decisions that I've said in the past. So we're going to get into that, but that's what you need to know, that it's expensive, it is huge. Also, you need to know that it's an RF mount, so it will only work on Canon cameras with an RF mount. So that does limit you. It's not like you could purchase this and use it on a Mark IV. So why did I buy this thing? Why did I buy this huge lens when I don't really need it? Well, if I'm being really transparent, I was intrigued by it because it is so different than anything I've used before. I didn't have an RF lens. Full transparency, we needed a business expense at the end of the year, and we thought, let's just give this a try. I love photographing my kids. I love it. But I have a now almost 2-year-old son, and he's very different to photograph than when my daughter was 2 years old. He's crazy. And I have a hard time focusing on him sometimes. And so I will use my 24-70 2.8 in the past, but even in a house with so much natural light, it is hard to shoot with that lens. I don't love that lens. And so I wanted to give this a shot, but I honestly, because I don't love the 24-70 2.8 as much as I love the look of a prime lens, I didn't have very high expectations about this lens. But then I got it and I realized, oh my gosh, it's so versatile. And when I'm shooting with it, looking through my viewfinder, looking at the back of the screen, it looks like I'm shooting with a prime. I've just never experienced that before with a zoom lens. Biggest things that I noticed when I started using this lens were that it's huge, it's really heavy, it is so fast and so sharp. Those are the two things I noticed as soon as I started using it day one. It's super accurate with its focus. This lens, honestly, the most negative response I've had to this lens is, oh, you're taking that on this trip? It's so huge. Or, hey, where are we going to put this in the camera bag? It's just really bulky. And when you think about getting used to shooting with the R6 and then the 50mm, I've just gotten used to everything being more compact. So it kind of feels like I'm losing that small compact feel that I really came to love about the R6 when I put this massive lens on there. So that's the most negative aspect of this piece of equipment. It's not going to be compatible with your backup camera if you just got an R6 and your backup camera is a Mark IV, like for us. So if we're shooting a wedding and something happens to the R6, I drop it in a pond, I have to shoot with a Mark IV. and this lens would not go on that camera. So that is a negative. So another con, probably the biggest con besides the weight, is the fact that this thing costs $3,000. And how can we justify that as wedding photographers or portrait photographers? And so the reason why I think you could justify it if you're in a certain season, in a certain scenario, is the fact that you could replace some of the prime lenses that I find necessary to shoot wedding days. You could replace 3 of them at least with this lens. So you could replace, I'm not going to, but you could replace the 85 millimeter, you could replace the 50 millimeter 1.2, and you could replace the 35 millimeter 1.4. Those are all the EF lenses that I've shot weddings with for a decade, and I swear by that collection. It just feels like the perfect collection to shoot a wedding. But I do think that you could get away with having just this lens and getting images that are almost exactly like what you would get with the 35, 50, and 85. Now, if you have followed me for any length of time, you know that I love the 85 millimeter lens. I love it. Our students in our Facebook group literally refer to it as the KJ lens. Like someone posted the other day, oh my gosh, I just got a KJ lens. And I'm like, what's a KJ lens? And then I realized they're talking about the 85 millimeter because I love it and talk about it that much. So I won't be replacing the 85 millimeter with the 28 to 70. However, I found just by shooting one wedding that I accidentally, kind of like subconsciously, replaced my 50 millimeter and my 35 millimeter with this lens. And I didn't even realize that I did it. It was just so easy to keep it on. And the reason why it seems baffling to say that is because in the past, the thought of using a zoom lens to replace a prime lens meant that you were going to have less sharp images because zoom lenses in the past have been notorious for being soft, not sharp. In the past, I would think about a zoom lens using that and just it being dark and kind of muddy looking and not crisp and clear. And this lets so much light in. This lens is not just a zoom lens that can go down to 2.0. There's something else about this lens and the new RF line that makes it kind of feel magical. And I'm sure all of you YouTube tech people are going to love that I just called it magical, but that is how it feels when I'm shooting with it. So if you were to buy the 50 millimeter RF lens for $2,200, right? $2,200, or the 35 RF lens when it comes out. It doesn't even exist yet, but when that is created, it's going to be around the same price point, if not more. So just getting those 2 lenses alone, all of a sudden, you are surpassing what this lens costs, and this allows you to have versatility when you're shooting. You don't have to go back and forth. And so it is weird for me to, after 10 years of shooting, it's weird for me to even think through how this lens, this one new piece of technology, could potentially change the way I approach shooting wedding days. So a lot of people have asked, have I used this on a wedding day? And I have. And I would say some of the highlights of that wedding day with this lens were, this was my brother-in-law's sister's wedding, and they had a family portrait with like 50 people. It was huge. And I was standing on the edge of a parking lot. They were backed up against a tree, like literally right next to the road. So there was some limited space. And I just used this lens for family portraits, and it was a dream because I could get super wide. I could zoom out to 28, get that family shot. And then once everyone dispersed and it was just like mom and the couple or mom and dad, I could zoom in and shoot at 50 millimeters at 2.0 and get this beautiful portrait that looks like I shot it with a primed 50. So I also used it for some portraits. The sun was setting, reception, everyone was waiting for us. So we were hurried, and I loved having this because I could get wide, I could get tight, and I felt like I was still shooting with the prime, still got the look of the prime. I also used it for some reception dancing shots, so I got to try out using it with flash, and that worked really well. I actually used it from entrances on. So that's basically, besides detail shots, I used it for majority of like all the events at the reception, which was really cool. So I was really happy with it. I had no issues at all. I literally think there was one part of the night where everyone was dancing. It was like the party dancing. I had my off-camera flashes set up and I was shooting, and the speed of this, the focus and the speed of this lens during party dancing, I think I remember walking up to Michael being like, this thing's amazing. And it is. I'm sad that I haven't had a wedding since then to try it out more, but from that one experience with it, I used it 10 times more than I thought I would. I thought this lens was for Michael, and now I'm considering, oh, well, maybe it's a little bit more for me, or maybe we can share. We're teaching our toddlers how to share. Maybe we can learn to share this lens. But when are some moments that I would choose to put on a prime with my adapter on the R6. I would not want to use this lens if I need to shoot a little bit wider. So I do love sometimes shooting at 1.6, but when I'm shooting at 1.6 ever with a prime lens, it's in a very controlled situation, and it's not in a situation where I'm hurried or rushed. I gotta be slowed down and chill and in a spot where I can shoot at 1.6 and make sure it's tack sharp. And I can't go down to 1.6 with this lens. So if I ever needed to shoot a little bit wider than 2.0, I would be looking at my other lens options. Michael used this lens for guides getting ready in a small, dark room, and his images were fine, especially with the ISO capabilities of the R6. Like, there's really nothing to worry about. So I wouldn't use it in a scenario where my 85 would be better. I am a stickler for, I love my 85, but if you are not attached to your 85 like I am, then honestly, you could just shoot with the 28 to 70 at 70 millimeters, and you probably wouldn't even notice a difference. But I'm weirdly attached to my 85, and so I would probably not sacrifice that lens for this lens. Like, this lens is amazing. I think I could see it taking away my need for a 50 millimeter and a 35 millimeter, but not my 85. Normal people, probably so, but not for me. Let's say you're a portrait photographer, you're not a wedding photographer. Especially, let's say you're a portrait photographer that photographs families. This, and you switch to the R6 or the R5, and you're looking for a lens to upgrade to, I would save your money and get this lens. Why? Because it gives you everything you could possibly need. You would have speed. I mean, when I started shooting with this for the first time, I shot something right here in the kitchen. I think Ty was actually here. Someone was here when we first got it. And we were just blown away. It's hard to describe how fast it is. And people, you know, they promise, Canon promises, like with the RF lenses, that speed, that's something that you should expect. And they did fulfill their commitment to speed. Like, we have seen it in action, and we love that. So if you are constantly capturing fast movement, if kids are running around, if you're trying to capture them being kids, I am not a family photographer, but I shoot my kids inside of the house all the time. This is the only lens that I'm shooting with. And there's a reason why I haven't taken off my camera, because I know I'm gonna sacrifice moments that I can't capture with a normal prime lens, even an RF prime lens. This is so fast. And I would say if you're a wedding photographer, you would need to really sit down and think about your situation. If you have an R6 and you're moving towards mirrorless, you love the R6, you're ready to move in that direction, before you spend a fortune on the RF 85, 50, maybe the future 35 when it exists one day, maybe consider slowing your roll a little bit and rent this, consider this, buy this, because I think that you could get more bang for your buck, and you could get more versatility for a lens all in one. I've never shot like this before, but it's a new day with new technology, and I'm really impressed by it. So in conclusion, will this replace my prime lens collection? The answer to that is kind of, because I do think it will replace my 50 millimeter, my 35 millimeter, but it will not replace my 85 millimeter, because my love for that lens is just too deep. But I do think that it's going to replace those other two, which if I was purchasing those two once, I know the 35 doesn't exist yet, but if I was to purchase those within the RF family, it makes sense to just buy one purchase, spend the money, get this lens, and have the flexibility, the versatility, the sharpness, a little bit of heaviness, but overall a reliable and super awesome lens. So if you love this video, if this was helpful for you, if you want me to review other RF lenses, I actually have the 85 RF and the 50 millimeter that I just said I probably would not need, so maybe I should return it. So if you want me to do a review on those, you better hurry, because I might be returning my 50 millimeter. But if that's helpful for you and you want to see more of that in the future, like, comment below, subscribe so you don't miss something in the future, and thanks so much for tuning in.
Bye!
Bye!